Stay with issues around COVID-19, and officials are awaiting coronavirus test results of the 114 South Africans who were repatriated from Wuhan, China, at the weekend. The group is under quarantine in Polokwane. One of the South Africans has been in contact with us, Slindelo Masikane. She joins me now to talk to me about that. Slindelo, so you're getting a sense from this one South African among the group that returned from China of what life is like under quarantine. What have they been telling you?
So, of course, we all saw the images this past weekend of that airplane landing at Polokwane International Airport and the movement towards getting these 114 South Africans into quarantine at a now military base, essentially at the ranch resort. And, of course, little is known exactly about, what's happened since. We do know, of course, from the MEC of Health in Limpopo saying that they will have access to, devices, to being able to watch TV, etc. But in terms of the process of what life is like inside, with this particular South African, I was in contact with him while he was still in China. In fact, he was studying there. He wants to be a medical doctor. And there was a lot of anxiety from these South Africans on essentially coming home. So the fact that they've now touched down and landed, he happened to be able to get in touch with me. Let's just take a listen to what he had to say to me with regards to what happened once they entered the ranch resort.
We had a challenge of financing at the chargers because the military is only now, we are receiving word now that the military is only bringing back our bags now. I think they want to spray them with disinfectants and what. So it is only now that they are writing a message to say, listen, the bags have arrived. So we have settled in.
So they've settled in. Is he talking about chargers?
So there was an issue around
phone chargers,
getting their bags, being able to have access to their phones. But once they were inside, their bags as well, basically, essentially had to be sprayed down, and they didn't have their phones. So once he was able to get a hold of his phone, he could quickly get a hold of it.
So what is he telling you about his impressions about the amount of attention being paid to COVID-19 and also about having come from the epicenter where it all started?
Essentially, we know, of course, now that the epicenter has moved from China, and the numbers, in fact, from where it all began are starting to lower. But there is a sense, I think you'd remember the outcry, many South Africans, some in Limpopo, saying, why are you bringing disease essentially into the country? But we do know, of course, that there were screening processes ahead of bringing these South Africans back. And there is a sense from the group that's here that they want to, of course, remain anonymous, essentially, because there seems to be a particular stigma around them being back. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I want to be honest with you and say most of the guys, especially who are residing in Limpopo, who are part of the quarantine, are very skeptical to talk to the media and other things. And none of them want to talk to them because of the stigma of the virus. I think those are the things that we need to go on and talk about.
Lastly, what information do we have about the original group that was in China and also about the processes to get them back from China to South Africa?
So you'd remember originally we were speaking of a group of 122 South Africans that had opted to come back. But once the plane actually landed in Wuhan to collect them, of course, another screening took place to ensure that those coming back aren't displaying any symptoms. And there was an assurance from government to say that they won't be bringing anybody who is starting to display those symptoms of the COVID-19 virus. So we do know that a few South Africans had to be left behind, unfortunately. What is still unknown, I think, at this stage to us is whether we will be going back to pick up the remaining South Africans that want to come home. But essentially, the group that is now here is once again being tested. We are expecting their results in the next couple of days. But there was, of course, a number of South Africans that were left behind. Let's take a listen to what Health Minister, Dr. William Kiza, had to say earlier today.
When our citizens were boarding from Wuhan, we did medical screening at that level, and that screening was done both by South African and Chinese authorities. Of the citizens that had presented themselves for repatriation, 4 had to remain behind. This is because they displayed some symptoms. It must be highlighted, this does not mean that they have been infected, but this was just done to mitigate the risk of having anyone in the plane that could have had any form of symptoms. So we are not saying that they've got the virus, but simply saying that on the criteria for bringing them back, we kept saying to the members here that we are only going to bring those South Africans who are displaying no symptoms and no fever and have not tested positive in any way. So we want to therefore indicate that in that system, 4 had that problem, and the Department of Social Development has already been in touch with the families, and so that matter has been dealt with as it were.
All right, Slindelo, thank you for that update. That's Slindelo Masikane watching that story there for us. I'll have